Behind the sun-scorched hills of California stands a fortress of concrete and steel, a place most people would rather forget. This is not just a prison, it's a world within walls, a world ruled by fear, power, and survival. Here, every clang of a cell door marks another man's descent into silence. Every footstep echoes through corridors lined with pain, regret, and violence. These are the sounds of California's toughest correctional facility, where the state's most dangerous men serve time that time itself can't erase. Built more than a century ago, this prison was designed to contain chaos. But over the years it became something far more. A breeding ground for gangs, a battleground for control, and a testing ground for the human spirit. Inside, the rules of the outside world mean nothing. Respect is earned through fear, and weakness is punished without mercy. Every inmate here has a story, of crimes, of broken homes, of choices that cannot be undone. Some dream of redemption, others have stopped dreaming altogether. Yet within these walls, life continues. Friendships form in the shadows, hope flickers in hidden corners, and moments of humanity appear where you least expect them. This is the place where California hides its darkest secrets, and where we'll go today, beyond the bars, to see what life is really like inside California's worst prison. Long before it became one of California's most feared institutions, this prison began as an experiment, a solution to a problem that kept growing right along with the state itself. In the mid-1800s, as California's population exploded during the gold rush, so did its crime rate. The streets of San Francisco and Los Angeles were just flooded with outlaws, drifters, and desperate men chasing fortune. The young state needed a place to contain them, far from the towns they once terrorized. So, in 1852, the first stones of this fortress were laid. Built by convict labor on the edge of civilization, it was meant to, symbolize control, order, and justice. But as the years went on, its walls absorbed something darker: fear, violence, and despair. By the early 1900s, the prison had already earned a reputation for brutality. Overcrowded cells, harsh punishments, and primitive conditions turned it into a breeding ground for rebellion. The guards ruled with iron fists, and the inmates responded in kind. Every riot, every death, every escape attempt added another layer to its grim legend. Through the decades, expansion after expansion transformed it from a simple correctional facility into a concrete empire, a maze of steel bars, isolation units, and surveillance towers. What began as a place to reform men slowly became a place that broke them. Today, those same walls still stand, thicker, higher, and more guarded than ever before. They carry the echoes of history, of a prison built not just to hold bodies, but to contain the chaos of a society that, honestly, didn't know what else to do with its outcasts. What began as a prison built for a few hundred inmates now holds several thousand. Over the decades, California's tough-on-crime policies, from the war on drugs to mandatory sentencing laws, have flooded the system beyond capacity. Each new law meant more arrests, longer sentences, and fewer chances for parole. The result is a facility designed for order now drowning in chaos. Cells meant for one man now hold 3. Hallways have been turned into sleeping areas, and gymnasiums, once used for recreation, are packed wall to wall with metal bunks. Privacy doesn't exist here. Every breath, every word, every movement happens under someone's watchful eye. Overcrowding has turned the prison into a pressure cooker. Tempers flare faster, fights break out more often, and medical care just can't keep up. With so many bodies crammed into so little space, diseases spread quickly, and mental health collapses under the weight of confinement. Even guards admit they're outnumbered and overstressed, forced to manage not rehabilitation, but survival. For the inmates, time moves differently here. Days blend into nights in the same four concrete walls. Noise never stops, shouting, clanging, the hum of tension always in the air. There's no escape from the crowd, no moment of silence to think or breathe. In this kind of environment, rehabilitation becomes almost impossible. Instead of healing minds, the system hardens them. Instead of correcting behavior, it breeds resentment and anger. And as the population continues to rise, one question echoes through the corridors: how long can this place contain the storm it has created? Inside these walls, every day follows a strict, unyielding rhythm, a cycle that never changes, only repeats. The lights snap on before dawn. The sound of keys rattling and steel doors slamming signals the start of another day in confinement. Breakfast is served behind bars, a plastic tray, a few minutes to eat, and no time to talk. Then it's back to lockdown. For many, that means 23 hours a day inside a cell the size of a small bathroom. 2 bunks, a toilet, a sink, and barely enough space to turn around. Privacy doesn't exist. Every conversation, every argument, every silence has an audience. The lucky ones get work assignments, cleaning, laundry, or kitchen duty. For them, it's not about the pay, it's about movement, purpose, and a few precious minutes outside the cell. Others spend their time reading, writing letters, or staring at the ceiling, counting cracks to pass the hours. When the doors finally open for yard time, tension fills the air. The yard is a fragile piece, divided by race, gang, and territory. A wrong look or misplaced step can turn a quiet afternoon into chaos. Guards watch from towers above, rifles ready, while inmates circle the yard in silent calculations of power and respect. Every day here is a test of patience, strength, and restraint. For most, survival depends on understanding one simple rule: mind your business, show no weakness, and never forget where you are. Because in this place, the smallest mistake can cost you your freedom or your life. Inside these walls, power doesn't always belong to the guards, it belongs to the gangs. Over the decades, prison gangs have evolved into organized empires, structured, disciplined, and deeply rooted in loyalty and fear. They operate with military precision, enforcing their own laws when the state's laws can't reach beyond the bars. Every inmate knows where they belong the moment they arrive, the color of their skin, the city they came from, even the tattoos on their arms decide their allegiance. The prison yard is divided into invisible territories: the Mexican Mafia, the Aryan Brotherhood, the Black Guerrilla Family, and others, each one controlling its people with an iron grip. Orders flow from the top down. High-ranking members, known as shot callers, dictate everything: who eats where, who works which job, and who pays protection. Even inside solitary confinement, communication never stops. Messages, known as kites, are passed through vents, hidden in laundry, or written in code. Disobedience isn't tolerated. Those who betray their gang face brutal consequences, sometimes in full view of everyone, as a reminder of who truly runs the prison. Violence becomes a form of governance, and loyalty a matter of life and death. To the outside world, gangs are the problem, but inside they're also the system that keeps a fragile order. Without them, chaos would erupt instantly. It's a paradox, a world where the very forces that breed violence are also the ones preventing complete anarchy. In California's worst prisons, the guards maintain security, but the gangs maintain control, and everyone here knows it. In California's toughest prisons, violence isn't random, It's routine. It's the language of power, respect, and revenge. Every corner, every corridor carries the memory of bloodshed. Fights can erupt over anything, a stare, a word, a debt unpaid. And when it starts, it ends fast and brutal. Weapons are improvised from whatever can be found: sharpened toothbrushes, melted plastic, metal scraps torn from vents or beds. Every inmate learns to make one, hide one, or defend against one. Because in here, being unarmed can mean being dead. Guards are trained to respond, but most times they arrive after it's over. A quick strike, a flash of steel, and the yard falls silent. The sirens blare, inmates hit the ground, and within seconds, the cycle resets. Another life lost, another name added to the list. For those who survive, every day is a test. You watch what you say, who you look at, and where you walk. Even small acts, sharing food, showing kindness, can be seen as weakness. Paranoia becomes your closest friend, yet beneath the violence, there's a strange rhythm, a system of unspoken rules. Most men don't want to fight. They fight because they have to, because showing fear is worse than spilling blood. Violence becomes a way of life, not because they choose it, but because in this world, it's the only thing that guarantees survival. In this place, peace isn't freedom from conflict. It's just the quiet that comes before the next eruption. For some inmates, the most dangerous place in prison isn't the yard, it's the isolation cell. A small, windowless room no bigger than a parking space, sealed behind a solid steel door. Here, there are no voices, no faces, no sunlight, just silence and time. Inmates in solitary confinement spend up to 23 hours a day alone. Meals slide through a slot in the door. Conversations, if any, happen through vents or cracks in the wall. Days blur into weeks, weeks into months, and for some, years. Psychologists call it sensory deprivation. Inmates call it the hole, and the hole changes people. Without human contact, the mind begins to fracture. Some hear voices that aren't there, others forget how to speak or lose track of reality altogether. Anxiety turns to paranoia, and paranoia to rage. For a few, the silence becomes too heavy to bear, ending in self-harm or suicide. But solitary isn't reserved only for the violent. Sometimes it's used as punishment for disobedience, or simply to maintain order in a system overflowing with people. Officials claim it's necessary for safety. Critics call it psychological torture. Both may be right, because in a place already defined by control and fear, isolation is the sharpest weapon of all. When the door finally opens and inmates return to the general population, many are no longer the same. Their eyes are distant, their tempers short, their sense of self shattered. Inside California's worst prisons, punishment doesn't always end with bars and chains. Sometimes it begins in the mind. Behind the walls, guards are the thin line between control and collapse. They walk the same halls, breathe the same air, and live under the same constant threat as the inmates they watch. For them, every shift begins with one unspoken truth. Anything can happen, and anyone can die. Correctional officers are trained to maintain order, but in a world built on violence and distrust, their job is part authority, part survival. Outnumbered sometimes 10 to 1, they gotta read faces, sense tension, and act fast. A single mistake can turn a routine day into a riot. But, power in isolation is dangerous. Over time, some guards cross the line between enforcing rules and exploiting them. Contraband phones, drugs, and weapons find their way inside, often smuggled in by those meant to prevent it. Money changes hands quietly, favors are traded, and loyalties blur. For others, corruption isn't about greed, it's about pressure. Fear of retaliation, exhaustion, or simply losing faith in a system that seems impossible to control. Many officers suffer in silence, carrying trauma home from a job that never really ends. The result is a prison divided not just by bars, but by trust. Guards watch inmates, inmates watch guards, and both sides know that corruption can come from anywhere. In this environment, control is fragile, held together by routine, fear, and the hope that another day will pass without bloodshed. Because inside California's worst prison, even those who hold the keys are prisoners of the system itself. Even in the darkest corners of California's prison system, a few sparks of hope still burn. Behind the razor wire and concrete, programs of change are quietly reshaping lives, one inmate at a time. Inside classrooms tucked between cell blocks, men who once ruled the yard now sit with pencils in hand, learning to read, write, and earn high school diplomas. Education becomes more than knowledge. It's a lifeline, a chance to rewrite the story of who they are. Other programs focus on healing the mind. Group therapy sessions allow inmates to confront their anger, addiction, and trauma, emotions that for years only found release through violence. In art workshops, they paint memories of freedom. In writing circles, they share stories no one outside has ever heard. Faith-based programs bring another kind of peace. Chaplains walk the tiers, offering prayer, guidance, and forgiveness to men who never thought they could change. For some, faith becomes the first real structure they've ever known. Rehabilitation isn't easy here. Progress is slow, setbacks are constant, and the prison environment often fights against it. But even a few success stories are enough to prove it's possible. Former gang members become mentors, lifers become teachers, and men once defined by violence begin to find meaning beyond survival. These programs don't erase the past, they illuminate the future. And in a place built to break the human spirit, that light matters more than anything. Because behind every cell door, there's a person still capable of transformation, if given the chance. Inside these walls, most stories begin with violence, loss, or regret. But not all of them end that way. In the heart of California's toughest prisons, redemption is rare, but it's real. Meet men who once ruled the cell blocks through fear, now spending their days teaching others how to read, paint, and find peace. Some were gang leaders who now mentor the young inmates they once recruited. Others, after decades behind bars, have learned that the hardest battle isn't against the system, it's against themselves. One man found purpose through poetry, writing verses about guilt, forgiveness, and hope that now echo far beyond the prison gates. Another, after serving 20 years, discovered art as a form of healing, his paintings of freedom and faith displayed in galleries across the state. These aren't miracles, they're choices, made in a place designed to crush the human spirit. Each act of change is quiet, personal, and hard-earned. It doesn't erase the crimes, but it reclaims a piece of humanity that the system often forgets exists. For those serving life, redemption doesn't mean release. It means peace. A chance to find meaning in the time that remains. For others, it's a second chance on the outside. A new life shaped by lessons learned the hardest way possible. In a world built on punishment, these stories prove that transformation can still take root, even in concrete. Because sometimes the most powerful change happens not when a man leaves prison, but when prison leaves the man. As the sun sets behind the towers and razor wire, the walls of California's most notorious prison cast long shadows, not just over the yard, but over the idea of justice itself. This place was built to punish, to separate those who broke the law from the world outside. But after decades of overcrowding, violence, and despair, one question remains: has it truly corrected anything? Inside, lives are frozen in time. Some men change, others harden. Many simply disappear into the system, forgotten by a society that no longer wants to see them. The world beyond these walls moves on, while those inside live the same day, over and over again. Yet even here, in the harshest conditions imaginable, humanity refuses to die. Inmates find meaning in education, art, and faith. Guards risk their lives to maintain order. Volunteers step into danger to teach, counsel, and listen. These small acts of compassion reveal something profound, that even in a place built on punishment, redemption, and dignity still matter. This prison stands as a mirror, reflecting not just the men it confines, but the society that built it. It asks us to look closer at what justice really means. Is it revenge, control, or the chance for change? For now, the walls remain, silent witnesses to history, suffering, and survival. But beyond them lies the question we all must answer. If the purpose of prison is to take away freedom, what do we lose as a people when we stop believing in rehabilitation? Because in the end, the measure of justice isn't found in how we punish the broken, but in how we choose to help them heal.